Hi, I'm Robert van Dongen. I am a lecturer at Breda University of Applied Sciences. At Breda University of Applied Sciences, we teach young people in 8 different domains of expertise, and one of them is built environment. In this mini-lecture on the built environment, I will talk to you about urban sprawl, and we hope that this mini-lecture gives you a bit of a feeling what lectures at Breda University of Applied Sciences are like. This is a beautiful picture of a beautiful city. It's Melbourne in Australia, and it's very typical Anglo-Saxon city. It's got a high density urban core, a central business district. Melbourne's also well known for the parks, as you can see in this picture. But what you can't see in this picture is that Melbourne is also a very large city in the sense of area that it takes. There's about 3.5 million people that live in Melbourne, and they live in the area that you can see on the left. Top to bottom it's 110 kilometers, and east to west you can go for 90 or more, depends on how straight you drive, of course. So that is a typical example of urban sprawl. The city, which started right in the center on the top part of the bay, grew outwards and outwards and outwards, and is still growing outwards. In this picture you see the map of the built-up area of Atlanta, more to the left, and then more to the right you see the same built-up area, but then in Barcelona in Spain. As you can also see, back in 1990 there were about an equal amount of people living in both cities. Actually there was 10% more in Barcelona, but it's a huge difference in area that these cities need to house all these people. Now that has a few big advantages, because when you live in Atlanta you will probably live in a large home with a big garden around it, and there's a lot of open space, so that can be really nice. In Barcelona you're likely to live in an apartment on the 6th floor, which is quite small, doesn't have a private garden, and if you want to go outside, well, you enter the streets and every now and then a park, but there's not a lot of open space for you to use on your own. You will always share it with a lot of other people. The other side of the coin is that if you want to go to your work in Atlanta, most of the time you will have to travel a long way to get to the central business district right in the heart of the city. In Barcelona that is less the case, because the city is very high dense and everything nearly really is the center of the city. Typically people that live in a sprawled city like Atlanta or Melbourne, when they need to travel to their jobs, they don't really have an alternative than by going by car. That is because of distance, obviously, it's a long way to the city center, but also there is no public transport. So riding a bike is not easy because of distance, and catching a bus or a train is not easy because it doesn't exist or is not very well serviced. And that obviously is because there's not a lot of people that would use it, because everything is so spread out. In any location in Barcelona you will find a metro station or bus station or any other form of public transport which serves a lot of people that can reach that bus stop or that metro stop within just a few minutes. And driving a car in Barcelona is not very easy. So to get to places in Barcelona you could probably get there faster using public transport, walking, cycling. And in Atlanta you don't. You will need to take your car, and a lot of people take their cars, and you see a lot of traffic jams. People spend hours and hours every day to get to their jobs. So you'd think having a sprawled city gives you space, which is true, but space also has a downside in the sense that there's larger distances. Another example I could show you is Calgary in Canada. From this area of the photograph it looks like a really neat city. Typical high density urban core. In the background you see the Rocky Mountains. It's a great picture. You can imagine that living in one of these suburbs, it's beautiful. You see the trees growing throughout the neighborhoods. But if you zoom in onto the central business district area, this is what it looks like. Now that's not a very appealing place to be. It may be a very attractive place to drive your car really fast, but it's not a place where you'd sit out on a terrace and have a cup of coffee, go shopping or stroll around. It's still a pleasant space for humans. It's a great space for cars. Now that can be different. You can design places that are more for people. An example of that is the Breda Market Square. It used to be the heart of the city back in the Middle Ages, and it still is. This is a place that is used now very much for people. So you can sit there and enjoy the sun, enjoy a cup of coffee or a beer. You'll have a lot of people walking around, and as it's the Netherlands, maybe cycling around as well. You can't get there by car. And that is one of the appealing things, because it's a place for people, not for cars. Now, to be very honest, it hasn't always been this way. Not that long ago, this is what the Breda Market Square looked like. And I think this picture shows instantly the exact point I want to make. This is a place for cars. So it's not a place for humans to just stroll around and have a coffee and enjoy their time. So, the point I want to make obviously is that urban sprawl is where you move outwards, leads to larger distances, and that leads to more car use. And more car use means that you have to design your city for cars, because people need their cars to get to places. Now, zooming in on the built environment and the courses you can study at Breda University, I quickly want to address the interaction of urban planning, urban design and mobility on all levels, because anything you do in cities will affect any other thing as well. You can't just take away a road and say, no, we'll just have cafes on the street now. We can't have cars here anymore, because the cars will probably want to go somewhere else. Or alternatively, how do people then get to that beautiful place? So changing one thing changes all the other things. And in the next few slides, I want to show you on all different levels how planning, design and mobility will always interact. On a very high level, you see in this picture the provincial cycle network of the province of Noord-Brabant in the Netherlands. More to the left there you see the city of Breda. When you make a cycle network on the level of the province, you will talk about really long distances to cycle. Now, the Dutch are silly people, they like cycling, but you need to think, do they also want to cycle for 40 kilometers or maybe even more? Well, they may, if the infrastructure is really well. And if you make really good infrastructure from one city to the other, cyclists might use it, and that will create a new flow of people going from one place to the other. So areas around such a really pleasant cycling infrastructure, which we could call a super cycle highway for instance, such areas will rapidly develop to accommodate new economical functions. Maybe a bike stop where you can grab a drink or repair your bike. Maybe any other form of entrepreneurship. Maybe there's going to be a bike exchange. So you don't actually have to own your fast bike, but you can just grab a fast bike from a lending station in the one area and then scoot electrically over to the other area. So typically what you see is when you build infrastructure for mobility, you will also always get all kinds of new developments around it. And you can see that happening on the level of the province. But if we would zoom in on one of those cities in Noord-Brabant, Eindhoven, you can also see the same thing happening with an urban cycle network. Here you need to obviously consider a lot more practical small-scale details, and you see the lines are not as straight because now we do have to fit it exactly in the urban structure. We have to consider where do we want higher density cycle paths, what are they connecting, and if you connect such places, what other places do you also connect, which can then develop? Maybe it would really support one of the smaller neighborhood shopping centers, or make hospitals more accessible so that the area around that also benefits from it, because if you can get there by bike, maybe you don't need the car. Now lastly, on the last level I want to zoom into, it's really on street level, and that's also where we enter the realm of urban design. In this picture you see one of the streets in Eindhoven, Noord-Brabant, that used to be 4 lanes of car traffic, and in about 15 or 20 years they changed it to 3 lanes of car traffic, 2 for cars and 1 for public transport, and just recently they've changed it to 2 lanes of car traffic. So over the years, 2 lanes of car traffic have disappeared, and that created space to use for other functions. And in this picture you can see that people walking or cycling get a lot more space, but also there's more space for greenery and just a place to be and hang around, to sit on a bench, to enjoy the new urban system that's developing there. So with this really brief mini lecture on urban sprawl and then zooming in on the interaction between mobility, urban planning and urban design, I hope you've got a bit of a feeling what our lectures at Breda University of Applied Sciences are about. Do you want to know more? There's all kind of channels that you can use. Obviously there's a few here, but if you have very specific questions, you might also want to send a good old email to our colleague Geraldine. This is her email address. Now, that brings my part to the end. And who knows, someday we might see you at our campus. Bye.